Yeah, so we thought to ask some more questions based on your all-time favorite autobiography, which most of us have read and maybe several times. So just you can check with us what it says.
Sure.
Yeah,
I hope I remember all that.
yeah, but I will remind you. That's what the questions are about. So, yeah, and, first when you were quite young, you got this Gayatri mantra in a dream, like to you. And if you could elaborate about Gayatri mantra, particularly that Savitur, that God, sun God being, and is it the same? Do you think it's the same concept as Theosophists when they talk about solar logos? If you can talk about Savitur as a being and as a not just symbolically sun, what sun is, but is that Savitur also worshipped being?
Um, the Gayatri mantra is Om Bhur Bhuva Swa Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhyo Yana Prachodayat. This is the Gayatri mantra. So, the Gayatri mantra starts with Om, Om, then Bhur Bhuva Swa. Om, we can have 4 satsangs on Om, so we won't elaborate here, okay?
Just a Savitur.
Yeah. So now we come to Savitur. We can't do only one word from a mantra. It will be out of context. So, Bhur Bhuva Swa. Now, the very fact that the Gayatri mantra starts with Bhur Bhuva Swa. Bhu meaning this world, Bhuloka. Bhuva is the next world, subtle world, and Swa is the next world, Swarga, which normally is referred to as heaven, but moksha or freedom is beyond Swarga. But when you say Swarga, Loka, world of, which is the short form is Swa, it means a world where people who have done good deeds enjoy for some time, take rest, and then come back again. Since it already starts with referring to the 3 realms, the Gayatri mantra would probably be also referring to what that is beyond in interstellar space. So the next after Bhurvasva, Tat Saviturvarenyam. Now, Tat means that. If English that and Sanskrit Tat are same. Now, why instead of saying Saviturvarenyam, so I worship or I prostrate or I pray to, or I worship is better, Varenyam. I worship. The Savitar means if it was only the sun, then you could say Savitar, Savitar Varenyam. Why that Savitar? Tat Savitar Varenyam. Which means to point out that here we are referring not only to the sun as a physical light, but as the reigning deity of the sun. And according to the ancient teachings, the first manifestation of life on earth is through the sun. So, the sun worshipped as a god, as a deity, is the first physical manifestation of light of the Supreme Being. So, in this world, since the sun gives us nutrition, the sun gives us sunshine, the sun gives us for the plants to create food, photosynthesis. Without the sun, nothing will work. None of these things will work. So, the sun is our first God to worship because it's what gives us light and it shines on all good or bad with the same intensity. doesn't discriminate. Oh, this guy is not good, so shine less. Oh, this fellow is bad, so shine, scorch him. Equal. I mean, depending on a geographical location, that is different, but it is not prejudicial to anybody. So, sun is therefore been worshipped from ancient times as the first representation deity of the Supreme Being. So, when you say Savitri, it means the sun, it also means the deity behind the sun, it also means the Supreme Being manifested as the sun. All these things are covered in it. If you go back into history, you will find that the most ancient temples in India were to the sun and the moon, not to the deities. The temples of Vishnu, Shiva, they all came much later. Shiva only had a linga first, a symbol, nothing else. And the only temples they had, the most ancient temples, were the temples to Surya, which is the sun, and Soma, which is the moon. Right? So, from ancient times, the sun and the moon have been worshipped in India as representations of the highest divine. So, therefore, in the Gayatri, you invoke the presence of the sun and the moon, and the spirit of the sun and the moon also included, and therefore the Supreme Reality who manifests as the sun and the moon. So Savitr Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi. Bhargo means that which is lit. Devasya is that Deva, the God, that illumining power. Dhimahi, I meditate upon. Dhiyo yona prachodayat. And why do I do that? So that my intelligence may become perfect and stimulated enough to understand that Supreme Being. This is the prayer of the Gayatri. So every day it's good to chant the Gayatri. But in the Indian system of thought, in the olden days, women were neither supposed to read the Vedas nor chant the Gayatri. Only the men. So now many women are also chanting the Gayatri, but still some of the orthodox swamis in India do not like it. So that is the old system. But I think it was a misunderstanding of the reality. I think at ancient times women also chanted the Gayatri. But after some time, the men took over and made second place to women. And so at some point the importance fell and it became, but I think originally everybody chanted the Gayatri. There's a Swami who appears on YouTube regularly who says women should not read the Vedas. So I asked him, what should they read? He said, there are other things too. I said, cookbooks. And then he got angry with me. Anyway, so this is the Gayatri. Please, everybody can chant the Gayatri. It's a prayer to the Sun God, to the Supreme Being, to enlighten your intelligence so that you can understand better. This is the prayer. And the actual prayer, Om Bhur Bhuvasva Tat Savitr Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. This is the mantra. 100 years ago, the orthodox people would have put me in jail for publicly talking about the Gayatri. Because it was always kept secret, so that only some people know. And those who know have power and others don't. So, power game.
Thank you. Then another episode when you, in the early part of your book, was that when you were meeting different saints and you were meeting this Gopalasamy, I think it was him, where you felt that he was X-raying you. You felt like, am I naked? Because he was able to see through. So this is the capacity of the gurus also and self-realized beings to be able to X-ray and look deeper. So can you talk a little, what does the person see actually, like soul history maybe, and where one is on the path? What is it that you see when you X-raying somebody?
First, let me tell you about Gopalaswamy. Since you asked the question from there, Gopalaswamy was a normal man. I mean, in the sense that he did not wear any special robes. His hair was short like me now, and, and he worked in the office, in the government office, in the office of the Accountant General of Trivandrum on Kerala. And he wore a white, in Kerala most people wear mundu. Mundu is just one cloth which is tied here. People even go to office, college, everything wearing mundu, no problem. And a shirt. So he also used to wear a white mundu and a half slack shirt, half sleeve, and he went to office regularly, and he was not married. But he was not a sannyasin. He didn't wear a ochre robe, he didn't do any such thing, he didn't have any mala, nothing. He was like an ordinary person. But I have reason to understand, others also know, that he was a person who had touched the inner reality. There's only one funny thing which I noticed when I saw him. When I met him for the first time, that his mustache was like Hitler, only here, not here. So, you know why people have a mustache like this? It's easiest to shave. Put your finger. Anyway, so so this was Gopalaswamy. And he has written a very nice, his talks have been written down, transcribed. It's pure Vedanta. And he did not even do pranayam. He said, if you reach the inner reality, the prana will adjust itself. This was his teaching. And he always, while talking, suddenly he would say, Anandoham, Anandoham, which means I am bliss, I am bliss. Achala Paroham, I am that which cannot move, which doesn't move, which is always there, which cannot be disturbed. So this man, when I was very small, I think 8-9 years after I met Babaji, I used to go to study mathematics to a neighbor's house. I was very weak in maths, so in my neighbor's house there was a maths teacher, mathematics teacher. So I used to go there in the evening to learn mathematics. One day when I went there, the lady of the household said, no, today there is no teacher. I mean, he's there, but he won't teach today. It's a holiday. I said, why? He said, no, one Swami is here. So we are not. I said, which Swami? She said, oh, you won't be interested. I said, yes, I am interested. I was only 8.5. So I went. Okay. She went inside and came back and said, come. So I went. And I remember there were all these incense, agarbattis burning here and there. And he was sitting on a chair, big chair. He was big, well built, big. And he was sitting like this. And then they took me inside. I was a small child, and they took me inside. Then he looked and he said, "Come, come and sit down here." Then he put his hand on my head, and like that he rotated. And then he told those people, good boy, good boy. He said 2-3 times in Malayalam language. It sounds somewhat like your language. He said, Nalla Kutti, Nalla Kutti. He said, good boy, good boy. And then after I came, when I went after 2 days for the maths lessons, I found that the household was respecting me very much. I was wondering why. They said, "Oh, come, sit down, have." So I found out why. So after I left, he told them, "This is a yogi, who came here." This is a yogi. He has met his guru, who will take him afterwards to the Himalayas. He told the whole kind of rough story. Even I didn't believe it, actually. I believed, yes, I had met Babaji, but that he's taking me to the Himalayas, I did not believe it. So he got only few minutes and he just looked at me like this. And I think he made a Google map of my whole life and personality. Yeah, so and then he could, okay, this fellow is doing this, he's going there. Now this is a capacity which develops in the yogi. But you shouldn't be doing yoga and meditation to develop these facilities. These are byproducts. They happen. Some people don't have also. Some have. It's like what happens is when the mind becomes very calm and quiet, it begins to see and hear things which are normally not visible to the ordinary eyes. The ordinary eyes can see only up to a certain level of frequency, light's frequency. Also the ears can hear only those frequencies which are suitable for the ear. They cannot go beyond that. When through the practice of yoga and meditation and various other practices, the mind becomes quiet and calm, it develops extraordinary capacity of gathering energy and sharpness. When it becomes sharp, then the hearing and the eyesight, everything improves. And you see things which are normally you cannot see with your naked eyes. And since all human beings carry some energy in them, that energy is always there in the body and it radiates. And if you have a special vision, then you can see the energy around a person. And that energy around the person, I am deliberately trying not to use the word aura, because nowadays in the United States, you can pay $100 and see the aura in 3 days. You will find it on internet. So I am avoiding the word aura, but this is what there is. There is the energy surrounding a person, which is visible for a special person who can see it. But not that everybody who says I can see the aura is speaking the truth, may not be. But it is possible for great yogis to be able to do that. So probably he saw me and he found out from the energy levels that I had that I was meant for something else, not the ordinary normal life. I have also sometimes seen certain things which are not normal, heard things which are not voices in the head, that is for a psychiatrist to look at. I have also experienced and seen these things, and I think it is there for all human beings. The capacity is there in potential. It's not been activated. But having said all this, the aim of meditation and spiritual practice should not be to this. This may develop automatically among the siddhis that developed in a person, in a yogi. But the yogis have always warned that you shouldn't get caught up with this and move forward. Suppose tomorrow you can look at somebody and predict that his girlfriend is going to come in 3 days, suppose, and the girlfriend comes, then you are in business. Then they will recommend other men to come, then you will be charging money for that, and then yogi is over and finished. That is the dangerous thing one needs to look at, move forward.
Is it right to ask or not that would there be those part of those CDs Maheshwanath has given to you, those X-ray, or is this you don't have to answer? But
now you're making me look like the KGB.
No. I just ask if those were the CDs Maheshwanath has given to you. I think it would be a normal CD for Guru having to be able to see where the student is and what's the situation.
See, but I got some things, but I have been told not to use it too much or misuse it, and not to use it for your personal purpose. If somebody is doing sadhana and they are having some problems and they voluntarily say, please look in and find out what you can help me, then I can do it. Not that I should be doing it, because it's not good to read somebody's private letter. This is exactly Babaji's words. Do not read anybody's private letter. I mean, in the sense that you shouldn't go into all these things. It's not a good thing for you. But in a case of a necessity, like somebody is traveling somewhere and they're having a severe accident and they're trying to connect with you and say, hey, I can't. Then if you don't do, then you're an idiot. I mean, you need to do some help. But generally we try to avoid. I said we, meaning those who are yogis, they try to avoid. Otherwise it will become a commercial thing, you know. You can attract people, but so what?
But maybe sometimes, like when students have some particular issues with Kriya practice, for example, or some problems might have occurred where you can then
that
check.
You can see and try to figure out why and help. Yes, this is possible. But it should not become a habit that everybody has a Kriya problem and they say, please look at my X-ray. Already I don't have much time, and then every day, okay, this person. So how long does it take? You know what? Before doing your Kriya, you're already chanting the Guru Mantra. Who was doing that today? For Guru Mantra. Where are you? Oh yeah, sorry. I think she has some yogic power. She just disappeared. I didn't. Since you're chanting the Guru Mantra, you're asking for help from Sri Guru Babaji while chanting the mantra. So I think what is necessary will come somehow to you. I think so, because you are under an umbrella.
In your book, you describe when you met Maheshwanath the first time, or the second time maybe, in Badrinath, that you have found your father, mother, friend, guru. can you tell more about these different kinds of relationships that Maheshwanath had with you, or that you had with him?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, can you elaborate more?
First of all, I was leaving home at a young age of 19. And once I had left home, I did not have any protection from anybody. In India, people don't go out so early when they're so young. They stay on and they're looked after. And so, since I was very pampered at home, in India there is also this thing about one child and elder son and things like that. It's nonsense, but it is there. So I was quite pampered and looked after, and my slightest wish would be fulfilled. It was a golden cage, although it was a cage made of gold. So suddenly to be on the street from that protected environment was not so easy for me. I suddenly realized that there is no father, no mother, nobody, no relatives, nobody. When I went out, it didn't strike me, but after some time it struck me. Yes, nobody. Now I'm on my own. Then I said, there's only God who can look after me. Or if I have a guru, real guru, then he will take that role. So when after all that trouble I took of walking barefoot and all that, and then on the verge of suicide, because I thought it's not working, and there's nobody now, no relatives, no friends, all alone. Better to end your life, and maybe next time I will come back in a better situation. All these things were going on in my mind. So then immediately after that, I saw him. Now the thing was that when I first saw him at the age of less than 9, I forgot that image, but his eyes were always with me. They were like haunting me, big eyes. So when I saw those eyes, I knew that it is the same person. And his response was also, oh, so you have wandered around and then come back to me. That was his response, in Hindi, of course. And then I said, I will now not leave you. I will stay with you forever. He laughed and he said, okay, we will see. And then my mind was reassured. So at that time I decided that he is my father, my mother, my friend, my everybody. There's nobody else to relate to anyway. And therefore in my life, in any situation I was, he always made sure that I did not get to a state where I would feel pained or troubled. There are many incidents. He was always barefoot. He never wore anything, no footwear. And even in the coldest of temperatures, he wore only a small piece here of cloth, nothing else. But he made sure that I wore socks, I wore shoes. He was looking after me like a baby. Once we were going to go Gangotri, he said, where is your muffler? I said, Babaji, I don't need it. Take it, you'll need it. And cap to cover the ears. He really took care of me because he knew that from the background I came, I might get into trouble with all these things. As a guru, he taught me things which I couldn't have learned from any book. As a teacher, he was very strict. He was not like me. He was very strict. If I didn't do something, he would take me to task for it. We had to do whatever he said in a proper manner. But he's quick to forgive. And he used to always look after me in long, lonely caves we stayed. Anyway, he never slept. So he would be sitting in the mouth of the cave all the time. I have been in places where bears and leopards in the night used to wander around. No fear, because Babaji is there. I knew that nothing will come. So he looked after me. I have seen him walk on the Gangotri Glacier barefoot. But he's got canvas shoes for me, brown shoes. If he asked anybody, they would give him. They considered him like God. So then he got me big socks up to here and collar and muffler and jacket and cap and everything. I was still shivering. So he said, now you see what would have happened if you, and don't imitate me, he said. I'm different, you're different, don't imitate me. This body is not the same body. Don't. And wherever I needed correction, he used to do it for me. Not only did he take care of me, he also took care of my parents who I had left behind. Because at some point he said, now you go back. Your mother is very ill, go back. So I said, okay. Really, you're serious? Because they won't let me come back. He said, no, you go now. And he said she is very ill. So I decided to go. He said, go cut your hair. Why? Don't go like this. Long hair I used to tie up. And I had this kundalis here. He said, take everything off, put it into the Ganga, go to the barber, get it. Your mother will probably get a heart attack. She saw you like this. So he looked after me and he looked after everybody. So he was like everything to me. I owe my knowledge, my understanding, my touching the divine, my body, my mind, everything I owe to his protection. You see, it was not an invisible one, he was right there. Till he left, he was there. So I could relate to him in many ways.
Is there a moment with Maheshwanath that you cherish as a favorite moment?
Two moments. One is when we were sitting on a rock near the river and he turned to me and he said, so, you understood? And I said, yes, I understood. He said, no more study required. This moment I cherish. The other moment, which was when I was sleeping that was much early, the first time, first 6 months I was. We were staying in the Arundhati cave. If you see the Arundhati cave, only 2 people can be there. It's very narrow inside. You've been there? Yes. You can see the river from there. So, this was the first night we walked all the way from Haridwar and came to Rishikesh. And we went straight to the Vasishtha Gufa. I'm sorry, Vasishtha Gufa, yes, first. He was not hungry, but I got some food there. I was very hungry. And then we went to the Arundhati cave. I was very tired. I thought, at some point I thought maybe I'm going to die. I mean, it's whole body was aching. I think I had a slight temperature, probably. And anyway, so I lay down and Babaji always lit a dhuni wherever he went, the fire. And next to the fire he sat like that, leaning on the wall of the cave. I knew that he doesn't sleep. He sat like that throughout the night. Somewhere in the night, I have described it in my. I felt something was tugging my legs. I thought it's a leopard because there were leopards in those days. Even now there are, but too many tourists in Rishikesh now. So they have all gone home. I thought there was a leopard tugging my leg, and I woke up with a startle, and I saw Babaji. He was sitting like this, and my right foot and was on his thigh, okay, and he was massaging it. I said, Babaji, what are you doing? He said, hey, sleep, sleep. It must be paining badly for you. You go to sleep. This was another moment which I cannot. Why would somebody do that? I am massaging. If I massage his feet, okay, the disciple is massaging the Guru. What is this? Huh? So that compassionate moment I always remember. That why would a man like that take your feet and massage it? And next day morning I felt like magic. I don't know what he did. So, and there are some other things, but these two moments I always remember.
So then there's another wonderful story also from the beginning of the book, of the beginning of your meeting with Maheshwarnath, where he gets the fire to lick your Manipura. Could you talk about the importance of Manipura and why why that is a relevant center of energy? And yeah, can you elaborate on that?
Among all the centers that we have in this psychophysical system of yogic anatomy, one of the most important, of course, the Muladhara is the beginning and Sahasrara is the last, is the Manipura, because it is the center of fire. The symbol of the Manipura is the fire, Agni, Igne. And fire is an element in nature which is extraordinary. One fire is enough to make everything on fire, just one spark. And it is combustion, it burns everything to ashes. It also, because of heat, transforms energy. It is the heat energy which is so important. Even digestion, according to Ayurveda, is a fire, the fire of digestion. When you say fire, it simply means combustion, heat. Tapas is derived from the word tapa, which means hot. So, the Manipura chakra therefore is the center which transforms your mind, your awareness from the gross to the subtle, burns away all the dross and leaves only the essence. So, Agni is very important. So, this, in fact, in some yogic tantric disciplines, they don't even go below the Manipura. They start their practice from the Manipura up. It's also called the Kundalini center. It's also called the center of the Devi, which is fire. Desire is also fire. Any desire. When you say somebody was fired with enthusiasm, nobody says watered with enthusiasm. So the fire is such an important. And in the early days, today you can light a fire like this. In the early days, if you need to get fire, it was a big process. In the Vedic days, when they wanted a fire to build an altar, they had to have a dry stick, and they have to another dry stick and rub it together to create friction, and from there the spark would fall on the straw and then light up. So it was a big elaborate process. So seeing that the spark came from the dry branch, the rishis said that it's like the human body, which when given the proper rubbing brings out the fire, inner fire. So Manipura is an important center in the ascent of energy towards the Sahasrara. Once this is active, all things fall in place. So it was important. So when I was watching the dhuni, I saw the fire go. Babaji would look up and it would go up. And when he looked down, it would come down. And again it would go up and then it would shoot up. So this coming to my Manipura was a surprise because I did not expect it. I was just sitting there and I was practicing Kriya, of course, because already he had taught me Kriya. And I had some problem with this. My digestion and this are very linked. So I had lots of problems. And then suddenly that it turned and hit me here, under Babaji's direction, of course. And from that day, my Manipura's activities all became perfect, became very significant. So for all people who practice Kriya and who do Chakra Dharana, it's important to spend some time in the Manipura and think of the element as a flame, as a red flame. It was activated automatically for me, but we need to work on that to get it activated.
What do you mean when you say that everything falls into place when the Manipura is activated?
Because then there is no more chance of the awareness descending to the lower levels. Once this is activated, it burns off all the dross. It integrates the nature, which is earth, and Agni, which is fire. The fire integrates the spirit and the gross, the physical.
Thank you.
There is a word for that in the ancient early Christian sects like the Gnostics. They have a word for that. They call it INRI. INRI. First I standing for Igne, fire. Na, the N standing for nature. R standing for renovation, renovate, Latin renovate. And I, last I standing for integration, integrate. Igne natura renovate integra. If you see a cross, and you see on the top they would be written INRI. This is the problem is that in the Hebrew language and also in Latin, the I and the J are interchangeable. So JNRJ would be same as INRI. So they read it as Jesus Nazareth Rex Judarum, Jesus King of Jews. Instead of INRI, JNRJ. So they thought the Romans were making fun of him. But actually, according to the Gnostics, the label there said that here is a being who is an integration, perfect integration of fire, which is the spirit, and nature, which is the earth, which means a human body with divine energy. So you see the importance.
Yeah, then there is this amazing episode of the brain surgery that was made to you, and that Maheshwana
God.
told that we have to hurry up and soon
Why
open.
did I write this book?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's too late to regret it now. It's already in the best-selling
Okay.
market.
So-
Anyway, yeah,
so-
so that otherwise it will take very long certain
What
channels
question?
to open. The question is, but I want to read the sentence here first because it's so beautifully how you describe what happened. Then afterwards, you describe that I opened my eyes and looked around. Everything was fresh, new, and pulsating with life energy. I was a new person, resurrected from the old that seemed to have vanished and died. I was no longer an isolated self. The center of consciousness was everywhere, from the humble dust to the Milky Way. All boundaries were broken. When I saw Babaji, it was as if I was him looking at me. So this kind of a new awakening that happened to you, and then also Babaji said that, so now you have to take baby steps and learn to walk again. So this grounding process of this realization then, so is it then culminating into that experience that there is no difference between inside outside, and is that the same as what can be called sahaja samadhi, that is like samadhi, eyes open and active in the world? So, and is that your current state? So the process of grounding and the culmination is the question.
Yes. In the beginning, you need to go in. You need to shut out the world. Once you find something there, then you open your eyes and you come out. Then you realize that what is inside is also what is outside. Hmm? If the inside and outside are then become the same, then there is no going in or coming out. This is why it's called sahaja, means easy. No going in and no coming out. All the time it's there. Whether your eyes are open, you're eating, drinking, it's there. Even in sleep, one part of you is immersed in that. So, but for me, two reasons why this process had to be done. One was I had work to do. Babaji had a lot of work to do. And he thought if I stayed with him and practiced whatever I was doing, and even with his guidance, without this particular act, it would take several births for me to learn all that he wanted to teach. So he wanted to quicken the process. So which is why they had to do all these things. They connected the Brahmarandra directly to the Sahasrara, to the It is not a good idea to do. You might end up crazy completely. So this is this is what they did to me. So after that, I don't have my brains anymore. They took it out and substituted it with donkey's brains. So I'm happy. Seriously. I'm joking, they didn't take out the brains, but they did something there. Some wiring process. I know what it is, but there's no point in understanding because I'm not going to do this to anybody.
And does the sahaja samadhi or the state you are in also mean that when you are sleeping and if you are even when you're snoring, you are still awake all the time?
Inside, yes, there is one being that the body might be tired, but there is not sleep in the normal sense of the term.
So you are aware.
You know what? When you sleep nicely and when you wake up, you feel that you had a blissful sleep, which is why it's difficult to wake up because you enjoy it. It's so blissful. Why would you wake up? So you try to go back to sleep. In the morning especially, an alarm, how many times do you switch it off before you wake up? Because you are enjoying the bliss. Somebody is enjoying the bliss of sleep. But when you're sleeping, you don't know it. Only when you wake up, you know that it is blissful, in between waking and sleeping. What if that is felt the same way throughout the sleep? Then it's similar to that. You actually enjoy the bliss, not the sleep, but the bliss. And then when somebody is waking you, the body and the mind are going from sleep to wakefulness. This is steady, it is always there. It neither sleeps nor is it woken up. And it doesn't get tired. This gets tired. That never gets tired. Well, what is there to get tired? It doesn't work.
But the mind still gets tired, so you can say you're tired.
Yes.
Yeah.
That we can say, because the body and the mind are also interrelated. And the mind is a little tired, then the body is also tired. And the body is tired, it reflects on the mind also. But not in the self. No. And if you learn how to open the mind to the self, then you can rejuvenate your mind fast than it normally takes. You can also handle jet lag.
Yeah, one more beautiful thing from the book. When you are in Kailash with the group several years later, then after Maheshwanath has passed, and you have this subtle experience where you are pulled up through many lokas to be with the masters. And so then the masters, one after another, convince you to go back because you have work to do. And there is this very beautiful how Guru Padmasambhava, Guru Rinpoche says here that adopt the bodhisattva path, Madhupa. The bodhisattva is ready to be born again and again to take others to nirvana. The arhat merely seeks his own salvation. So if you can elaborate that, how you said in that episode that you recognized that there was still this selfish lingering for personal liberation in the book.
I thought...
Then now have you then adopted bodhisattva path, and what does it mean to you? And
You know, like they're speaking in the Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana language. It means that nirvana or freedom is attained by the arahants. The arahants attain the nirvana. There are some few who go up there and they know that they are free and they don't have to come back. And then suddenly strikes them, there are many people who don't know this. Many people who are suffering because they don't know there is this freedom. What will I do if I alone go and be free? Let me take somebody with me. So they deliberately step back and say, okay, at least one person I can take back with me when I go to. It's not to do any selfish motive. It's compassion, it's love and affection. But I actually didn't have that much. I was only thinking of my own freedom till that point. So when this was said to me, I suddenly realized, yes, this is true. Look, we all have come back for hundreds and thousands of lives. All of us. You, me, you may not know it, but come back. At some point or the other, one of you may have been my mother. Who knows? So, at least you can take one mother back to nirvana. So this is the attitude, this is the thought process. So that time when he said that, it struck me, yes. So I said, okay. Because if I had allowed that blood to go up, then that it was the end. So the moment he said that, I was back on the tent and I had such profuse bleeding in my nose. I don't know how much blood came. The people who were with me know that. They kept supplying me with cloth to stop it. I mean, not stop it, to. And then after about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, stopped. And there were 2 doctors in the campus with us who were walking with us to Kailash. Doctors thought that I was suffering from loss of blood. They wanted a transfusion. I said, no, I don't want anybody's blood to be transfused into my body. And I've not said that, but I stayed 1 or 2 days. I was weak. After that, I was fine. I walked back from Kailash. So that process kind of brought me back. Now I'm very happy. Even if I come back again, I don't care. It's okay, I can never be caught now.
Happy to hear, and thank you for coming back.